Welcome, KMR, Kyle Mohan Racing, and it is time for another Rotary Technical Talk. Today, we're going to be talking about lightweight Mazda rotors. Or for that matter, taking an OEM cast iron rotor and doing some type of lightning to it. Is it good? Is it bad? Oh, well, obviously it's good. It's definitely good. In fact, it's really good. You're taking rotating mass internally out of your rotating assembly. That is definitely good. We're going to talk a little bit about why it's good, who is doing it, and what to look out for if you're getting this service done. This one right here was done by Chip Ursu. Fantastic work, and this is the example we're starting with. You can see that it has been lightened in the face. Generally, I would see most services done like this are able to remove somewhere, give or take, around 1/3 of a pound per rotor. It's very good. I recommend not going too deep because underneath this area is not necessarily even casting material. Generally, what I see is a thicker portion here in the middle where the factory balance holes are, and then a little bit thinner areas in these corners. And I can show some examples of where shops machined through this area later in the video, so stay tuned. But you can see that this has been very nicely dished or cut out, CNC'd, not too close to the side seal. You want to have enough support there that under compression, flame front, and just generally speaking, you're not putting any unnecessary risk into the rotor. I've never seen a side seal fail in something that has been properly machined. If you get too thin in any of these areas where the corner seal is, where the side seal is, if this pocketed area ended up too close to that side seal, you could run the risk of failure. Obviously, this area is lowerable. There's no significant compromise as long as you don't go too deep, but your land area or gear and land area should not be significantly reduced in any way, as that could lead to failure. You should also leave this, I guess it would be the middle oil control seal ring at stock or close to height, whatever your gear land area is at. If you're narrowing, don't narrow too much, because you do want to have that for your O-rings to seal to properly for your oil control rings. There's been variations of rotor lightning done. Some companies like Racing Beat actually do snap ringing and internal lightning, which is also very good. For a lot of the KMR builds, we just go with this face lightning, as we've had no real issues with durability, drivability, runability, horsepower making, longevity, the ability to balance, anything like that. So I think this type of lightning, whether it's on a new or used rotor, is very good, very viable for performance application rotary builds. Something that's going to see higher RPM or higher boost levels. By reducing that rotating mass, you're actually cutting down on some of that side-to-side motion that the rotors do get, that wobble, by taking out that face weight. And that allows you to go a little bit higher in RPM, or when you're adding boost, that same rotational effect, that loading, by cutting that rotating mass down, you're also reducing that load that's put on the bearings, put on your internal components, put on the rotors. It's just a good thing. Think of piston motors. If you can cut down the weight of the piston, everything gets better. It's the same thing in the rotary world. If you can cut down the weight of your OEM rotor, it's better. I'm not a huge fan of notching, although that does reduce the weight slightly. It does reduce the compression as well, and on the Mazda Tricks dyno, we saw no significant gains for doing that notching, even though I will agree that the theory is there. We just weren't able to prove it on a dyno, so therefore we don't really do it unless the customer really, really, really wants it. I think facing is a good thing on big boost, big horsepower applications. Don't need it in most cases. Race bearings are great. Side cutting is marvelous if you're trying to raise the RPM on your motors, rotors. These are just some tips, and we're going to talk a little bit more about what internal lightning is. So I'm going to grab a racing beat rotor so we can compare the traditional racing beat lightning to kind of this modern face lightning and some of the differences in the webbing. All right, racing beat rotor on hand. So I'm sorry, this one's used, it's old, it's damaged, but Mazda Tricks was nice enough to let us borrow it for the video. It came out of a customer's old race motor that had some kind of issue. So just because your rotors are lightened or you have racing beat rotors doesn't mean you still can't blow the motor up. People find a way. So right here you can see racing beat, which I know in the US was probably one of the originators to Rotor Lightning, went beyond just this face lightning and actually cut the internal webbing structure down with the CNC operation. This allowed the racing beat rotors to be significantly lighter than most lightning services on the market. This also led Racing Beat to only doing this service on brand new rotors that they deemed fit for the service, and it led to a pretty high price tag, but it was pretty nice work. They also snap ring the gears back in, so that means this gear has been removed. They've cut a snap ring groove, pressed it back in on the pins with a snap ring, so this gear cannot walk out. It's a good thing to note, although it's very rare. You can get gear movement, and so if you're buying used race rotors, you should know some specs, what OEM rotors should be, and you should be making sure that your tip to gear or tip to land has no significant differences. I can cover some of that stuff in another video, but yeah, gears can fall out if rotors are going to extremely high RPM or having extreme duty and use applied to them. In my 1,000 horsepower race motors, I do get away with the just side lightning, side cutting, and balancing. I like to have this extra webbing in my rotors for high boost applications. I think that's actually adding more strength to the rotor. And although, like I said, this came out of a failed motor, you can see right here, if I get close, it also had failure in the webbing. So whatever happened to this motor was very extreme that led to its failure. Spun bearings, side tip damage, and cracked webbing. So, you know, just things to consider. Racing beat rotors definitely highly recommended. But basically, as long as you're going with a reputable shop that's got a good track record, you shouldn't have any issues. You don't want to see, like I was saying, you know, cutting too close to the side seals, too thin in the walls, or anything abnormal like that. I'm going to show a couple examples of what that can look like now. All right, so here's some examples of what you don't want to see in Rotor Lightning. And like I said before, you know, RX8 rotors are a little thinner. They're a little different in their cast and shape and properties than the traditional rotors. And as far as I know, even the new castings, meaning if you buy a brand new rotor from Mazda, it might be a little thinner in these areas as well. So generally, most good rotary performance shops have an idea of how deep they can go. So you avoid this type of situation where you can see in this rotor, this was an RX8, and although the middle area is still thick enough, as you got out towards the edges and the material tapers off a little bit in the oil gallery pockets in the rotor, it was so thin that basically we were able to move the material with our fingertips. And you can see that the lightning was off center or just not done well. And the pocket's actually so close to the side seal that, like I was saying earlier, this would run a risk of side seal rotor failure, and you just don't want to see that. Other side, a little bit different, but you can see it's also just too close. So unfortunately, this type of service work would deem these rotors unusable. And this KMR Rotary Workshop Performance Tech Talk, not a TikTok, it's a Tech Talk video. And as you can see, we talked about our rotors. Rotor Lightening is good. Like I said, it's cutting down internal rotating mass. You can spin that motor higher. You can run more boost. You get less shaft flex, less rotor wobble. It's all the things you want in a rotary. More RPM, more brap, more fun, and more longevity. Always make sure to balance your rotating assembly after any type of rotor work or machine work. And enjoy. KMR, Rotary Talks, follow, say hi. We got the brap. Brap, 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 brap.